Hello everyone, my name is Alex. I'm a 2000 rated over-the-board chess player, and in this series we are trying to climb to as high a rapid rating as I can on chess.com while explaining my thought process as best as I can for your education and entertainment. So we'll play a Vienna game here. My opponent goes knight c6, which is known as the Max Lang defense, but I mean it's not really a big deal what it's called. Essentially, if knight f6, we can play a Vienna Gambit, and if knight c6, then we have a Vienna game with bishop to c4, where we're essentially just trying to exert a lot of control over the d5 square, and in the future, if black does, like, nothing of significance, we want to do something like d3, f4, knight f3, castles, and apply a lot of pressure to e5 and the f7 pawn in the future. Now, black can obviously try to stop us from doing that. So we'll start with d3. And the critical line in this position is knight to a5. He doesn't go for it. He goes bishop to c5. So the reason that knight to a5 is the critical move is because our bishop can't escape, right? Our bishop is going to be taken by the knight. So black would win the bishop pair. But personally, I think white has good compensation for that. After bishop to c5, we'll continue with f4. And this can lead to some very interesting lines, because by playing f4, black goes pawn d6, which is obviously very normal, knight to f3. We would love to castle here, but we can't, because this bishop is monitoring this diagonal. You also have to be aware of what happens if black plays knight to g4, going after the f2 square, because by playing knight c6, e5, and bishop c5, as I was saying at the very beginning, black is exerting a lot of control over the d4 square, like the opposite of what we're doing to d5. Meaning that if knight to g4 is played, we can't play d4 to block the bishop's scope like you would in openings like the fried liver or something. But my opponent doesn't go for it, and after knight g4, we actually have very nice attacking ideas with knight to g5. But he goes bishop e6, which is an interesting way to play the position, offering us a bishop trade. Now, theoretically, we could take the bishop, and after pawn takes, we could take on e5, and after pawn takes, the black structure is, optically not very good. It's actually quite powerful, the pawns on e6 and e5, because while they're really ugly looking, if you just look at the squares that they'd be controlling, they actually exert really nice control over the center. They open up the queen. If black castles kingside, the rook is open. It's not actually that good. So I do not recommend taking this bishop. And I'll be making sure I recommend that in the school course when I when I release the Vienna portion. So, alternatively, we could play a move like knight a4, chasing down the black bishop. And on take, we have very nice control over the d5 square, although we do double our c-pawns. Now, problem is that just hangs the e4 pawn, so we can't play that, unfortunately. What else could we do? Well, we could play a move like knight g5, forcing the bishop to make a decision. But I mean, black just takes, and why is our knight on g5? It's a bit misplaced. We could also consider f5, forcing the bishop to take, and having really nice control over the d5 square, playing something like queen d3, maybe bishop e3 castles, and play the knight into d5. That looks quite interesting to me. We also have knight to d5, which means that we can't chase this dark squared bishop away anymore, but black can't take with a knight, because pawn takes would fork his minor pieces. So if knight d5, we could maybe prepare the move f5. If the bishop takes, we could take with the pawn, I guess. After the knight hops into d4, I'm not sure I want to trade everything like that. I also don't really want my e-pawn to have to move away, because these two pawns are much better together. So with all of that in mind, I'm going to play pawn to f5. And I know that was a long turn, but I'm trying to, kind of show you my thought process. When I'm in an opening, my opponent is asking me a difficult question. Because, I mean, I can also consider moves like bishop b5. That would also be viable. Or taking on e5. That would also be viable. There's loads of different considerations to be had. So I'm trying to show you how you can try and think like that for yourself. So my opponent chooses to take on c4 since I prompted him to do something. Then he goes pawn h6, which is a very good move, because if he doesn't go pawn h6, I will very likely play bishop g5 followed by knight d5. I might just take the knight with my bishop as well, and then I have a super strong knight on the d5 square. So h6 is definitely a good move, but it is slow. So okay, how can we continue? Well, a3 makes sense to me. Basically preparing queen d3, also maybe preparing pawn to b4, chasing the bishop. Queen e2 might actually be stronger, because I want to go queen d3, just defending the pawns and maybe preparing bishop e3. But I guess if queen to e2, we don't have to worry about knight to b4. Although if queen d3, knight b4, we can always drop the queen back, and then the knight is misplaced, and we can kick it away anyway. So that might actually be stronger. So just go queen to d3 immediately. Although, if we go bishop to e3, then knight b4 could be a problem, because our queen will get overloaded defending c2 and the bishop on e3. So queen e2 probably makes more sense. If queen e2 and knight g4, I think we can just go rook f1. That's not a problem. So let's go queen e2. And I think I just want to go bishop e3, castle queenside. And you can see how I'm trying to exert a ton of control over the d5 square, which, as I said, all the way back on move 3 was a key idea of the opening in general, right? So my opponent goes knight g4. I mean, I can just go rook f1, and then his knight is misplaced. And he doesn't have any ideas to bring the queen in, because my knight is strong. In fact, pawn h3 might be even better, because if the knight hops into f2, I can just go rook f1, and the knight is trapped. The knight's completely trapped. So I can go h3, and the knight has to retreat. Right? Very nice. Very nice. And black has just wasted his time, essentially. So I would say we're already better because of that. You could also consider a move like knight to d5, because if knight f2, rook f1, the knight will be forced back to the g4 square anyway. But I think I like the pawn on h3, because we're going to castle queenside, and storming the kingside with something like g4 and g5 could be quite fruitful. So yeah, I'm a big fan of this position, and this kind of pawn structure is, I wouldn't say typical, but you will see it more often than you might think in these Vienna game structures, because we do just kind of suffocate the black position through our control of the light squares, right? And it's not the easiest thing for black to contest them, I would say. And again, d5 is just a gaping weakness. He could try moving this knight and playing c6 to exert more control over d5, but that would just fundamentally weaken the d6 pawn, which we have an open line against. So double pawns are not always bad. I think that a lot of people, probably under sort of 1800 maybe, see double pawns and immediately think, oh, bad. Like, they're not. They're not automatically bad. They can be bad, but in this case, our doubled c pawns, I would argue, is a massive strength. I'd much rather have my pawn on c4 than on d3 in this position, because our position is more active because we have the open lines as a result of the doubled pawns, whereas black doesn't have that. So the knight goes back to f6. He can maybe try and bring it into h5 and like g3, I suppose. So g4 might be the best move, stopping the knight from coming into the game. And if g4, h5, we can just push g5. So while I would like to play bishop to e3, knight h5 is slightly concerning. Although, let me think. If I were to go bishop e3, and my opponent was going knight h5, can I go knight e5, opening up the attack? I think my queen's overloaded. To be honest, I think g4 is a good move in lots of these positions anyway. It can't be a bad move. It takes the sting out of any g6 ideas as well, because if takes, I want to take with the g pawn. My opponent hops in the knight to the d4 square. I'm not really sure what that accomplishes, though. I mean, bishop e3 looks strong. Knight a4 also looks interesting, trying to chase this bishop. But then maybe I'm allowing this at some point. I could take the knight on d4. The reason I don't want to is because of pawn takes. And then he can close the d file. So I think bishop e3 makes more sense. Although, wait, if bishop e3, knight c2, queen c2, bishop e3, black wins a pawn, I don't have a follow-up. So, okay, let's not do that. Okay, so don't really want to play that. What else can I do? What else can I do? Yeah, knight a4 is interesting. Sorry, my queen is under attack. My queen is under attack. Okay, well that simplifies things, doesn't it? That simplifies my decision. Let's take. If bishop takes, just bishop d2 or queen d3. Looks fine. Yeah, bishop takes, I think is fine. Bishop d2 castles, perhaps. Knight d5 is interesting. Knight b5 is interesting. If knight d5 take, though, I don't want to close the d file. That's the thing. But I do want to play pawn c3 to kick the bishop out. So if knight b5, this exchange would be nice because the pawn is weak. I could prepare an e5 break, I think. So if here and the bishop moves, well then my knight is misplaced. So bishop d2 might be the easiest option. Yeah, I'd say so. Let's go bishop d2. My opponent is playing well here because the more pieces that he can trade, in theory, the less of a problem the d5 square becomes. So it wouldn't be ridiculous for him to actually just take the knight, and after bishop takes, basically say, okay, you can't bring a knight to d5 anymore. So, okay, he goes pawn c6. Let's castle queenside. Get the rook on the very nice d file. And, I mean, I'm not thrilled with the placement of my bishop. I'd prefer it on e3, but it's not that big a deal. Let's go king b1. Just making sure a2 is defended. Now we have ideas like knight to d5 with discoveries. I didn't want to do it in this position because queen a2 and we are in big trouble. So, you know, not a good shout. You could make the argument for knight b5, but after queen a2, knight c7, checkmate is threatened, so our attack is unimportant in comparison. And king b1 is just always a good move anyway. I don't think the queen is very well placed on the a5 square. Queen b4, okay, that's interesting. So if I move the knight, he mates me in 1. So let's not do that. I could go pawn a3. Trying to kick the queen away. c4 is defended. Pawn a3, queen b6, knight a4, queen a6. Not sure why my knight's on a4. What else can we do? What else can we do? I think a3 is the only move that really makes sense. Because the queen is quite annoying on b4. I'm not falling for any tactics. I mean, there's nothing. My queen defends everything anyway. And the bishop defends the knight. If bishop takes, I could take back, but I could also just take the queen. So the queen has to move. And yeah, I mean, c5 I don't think makes sense. In fact, the queen is trapped after knight a4 in that position. The queen doesn't have that many squares, I've got to say. I mean, queen b6 just looks like the only move, because you prepare to retreat if you need to, but also you have the a6 square to go to. Because I can't really play c5, giving up a pawn. Yeah, so queen b6. So if I move the knight, I get checkmated on b2, although I can go to a4, where b2 is defended. Here, c3. Take. e5. Possible. I do rip open this diagonal and the d file and the e file. That's interesting, actually. Can I do that? Here, c3. I sack a pawn, but I think I get enough compensation. I think I do. Yeah, the queen can't help out on a4. So that's interesting. What if the bishop moves, though? Well, if the bishop moves, I can take it with the knight, can't I? But then is my structure weird? So let's say bishop back to b6. Why is my knight on a4? Unless I take. I expect pawn takes, trying to open the a file. And then what? I don't know. Well, I suppose d6 is weak. I could play like bishop e3, or maybe that hangs the e pawn. Maybe bishop c1. Preparing g5, opening up the d file. The a file should be fine. If b5 is played, I can just take it. Yeah, I think that works. Let's go knight a4. I think I can sack a pawn here for good play. So b2 is defended. That's the key point of knight to a4. You find this in many positions, where the knight comes out to a4 to hit the queen on b6, or vice versa. The knight comes out to a5 to hit a queen on b3, but it also defends the b2 pawn. So even like obviously here my opponent's trying to mate me on b2, but there'll be many situations where black is just trying to take a pawn on b2, and the knight defends as well as attacks. So queen a6, as expected. I mean, it's really the only viable move, and I think c3 is what we want to go for. So if take, e5, I think we've got great compensation. If c3, you can't take because of knight takes, and I save the piece. If c3 and the bishop moves somewhere, if c5, I assume we must just take it and play bishop e3. The rook's coming to d6, pawn's coming to g5. That looks really good. And if he goes to b6, I think we take it. So c3, bishop b6, take. If queen takes, then no problem. Bishop e3 can come with tempo. If pawn takes, opening the rook up. Bishop e3 could still... No, because knight c3, desperado. Bishop c1, opening up the rook, preparing... No, you can't prepare c5. Rook d8. Rook d8, pawn g5. Maybe h4, g5 is interesting. I think that makes sense. Let's go c3. So this is a bold move. I may be sacking a pawn, but the only way that black wins a pawn here, because again, you can't take like this because my knight takes. The only way black wins a pawn is if he plays queen takes, pawn takes, pawn takes. But I think e5 is too strong in that position. I think it's too strong. Because the problem is, the knight is under attack, and the knight can't move while defending the d-pawn, so the e-file will be ripped open. And I think part of the reason I'm justifying this pawn sacrifice line, a big reason, is because the king's in the center. If the king was castled already, I would not be doing that. No chance. If this position was on the board with the king castled, I would immediately be playing... Oh my god. I'd immediately be playing h4, g5. Immediately. If the king was castled this side, in this position, I might still be playing h4, g5, to be fair. I might still be playing that. And I mean, you know, if black does castle in this position, I mean, he He could. That wouldn't be ridiculous. That wouldn't be ridiculous. My knight doesn't have a way out of the position. This idea only works because this bishop doesn't have any retreating squares that the knight can't see. Because if the bishop could go back to c7, for example, then my knight would have no moves, because c3 was its only viable square. So I'd have to play b3, defending the knight, and then I'd be in a lot of trouble. So, okay, my opponent goes for it, which is very bold. He probably won't take this pawn, though. That'll be too much, and I think he knows that. He might castle, for example. But even if he does, I still think we have great play. Something like castle queenside, take, and bishop to c3. And e5 is just a massive weakness. Massive weakness. And our queen holds on to everything very nicely. Again, h4, g5 could be an idea still. So I think we're doing very well. I think we're doing very well. By the way, if you've made it 20 minutes into the video, and you haven't already, please drop a like and subscribe. I'd really appreciate it, as the channel is almost at 20,000 subscribers. Which is insane. Absolutely insane. Moves like c5 are also interesting, because if take, we can maybe take on e5. The problem is, I guess queen takes d4 ideas. Whoa, b5? What? Well, I refuse to believe that works, because you can't play b4, because my bishop. What? c5, take. No, that's going to be a bit silly. What about... I did not expect that. I'm not sure it's that good, though. I don't see a point of taking. There's no need. I'll happily let... Well, would I let that happen? I don't know. Well, I think taking on e5 is clearly good. So take. Take. Maybe bishop b4? Trying to stop black from castling and opening up my rook and cutting the queen off. I think there might be a5 there, though. So take here, a5. Bishop d6. b4, I'm asking for trouble there. Okay. I could go like take and take. Bishop b4, pawn a5. Not sure. Not sure. That's a very interesting move. I could go take c5. Not sure if it's good, though. a5, preparing b4. Oh, no, my e4 pawn hangs in that line. Oh, that must be the idea. Ah, right, that makes sense. What about d5? Does that make any sense? Take. No, I don't think so. Why would I want to shut that? Could go for the immediate bishop d4. Sorry, bishop b4, targeting d6. That might be better, actually. If a5, bishop d6, b4. It is really scary, though. But if he takes on a3, my bishop can take, and he doesn't open up the a-file. This might be the move. If c5, I can just take it. And I'm also just cutting the queen off. This is a bit of a nuts position. There's just so much pawn tension. But it's really hard for black to get his king safe. Particularly after playing b5, because castling kingside, you're just going to walk into getting mated very quickly. The pawns are set up perfectly for a checkmating attack. So you can't go kingside. But that means this rook is out the game. And you can't really go queenside. So, I mean, you can, but it's very risky. And I can probably take on b5 and be rather justified in that. Although maybe a queen trade is a problem for me because of the e4 pawn. e4 is a weakness. It is a weakness. But it also means that d6 is a weakness because it's controlling the d5 square. So give and take. I also open up the rook quickly, which is good. I mean, I'm playing with 3 of my pieces currently. I guess black's playing with 2. Yeah, this is very interesting. I just don't think this was enough. because after this trade, everything is down the queen side, and I don't want it to be. I mean, I can try this weird maneuver, but I think if bishop to b4 comes with actual threat, it makes more sense. My opponent goes for it, a5, okay. Well, let's take on d6. That's the only move, I think. So we're up a pawn for now. e5 is hanging. If this is taken, pawn e5 looks pretty strong. If knight d7, pawn e6, and I think we're probably completely winning there because we just crash through the position. The key point is that on b4, my bishop can always take on a3. Obviously, I'm not going to take on b4 because then the pawn can come to b3, the queen can come to a1, these kinds of things. I'm just getting mated. So I need to try and keep this rook out of the game. And you can see how my pawn on a3, which I played to kick the queen away from b4, can be used as a hook by black to try and open up the lines. But he can't go rook b8 and try and take on a3 and use the b file because I control b8. So bc4, okay. He might be trying to go for c3 now, which does make sense. This makes sense, though. Comes with tempo. I mean, if c3, I'll just take the knight. Black doesn't have enough. Well, yeah, c2 doesn't work. Yeah, we're just going up a pawn. If knight d7, e6 still looks interesting. Just trying to blast open the king. And we're up a pawn. The black structure isn't very good. I mean, yeah, I also need to play kind of quickly, but I just don't think our king's in danger. The only pawn break is c3, which, I mean, you can't do that yet. I'll just take the knight, and then you have no threat. c2 doesn't come with a fork. My queen controls that. Okay, knight d7. Okay. Let's think. e6 just looks like the right move. Take and take. Knight b6, I assume. Or maybe knight back to f6, but then we go pawn e5 again. So, knight b6. Bishop c7? Bishop c7? Where does the knight go? Don't know. Also, we have bishop e5 ideas. Monitoring everything. It has to be e6. I mean, we have to explode the position. The black king is completely stranded in the center of the board. You know, you can say, oh, my king is a bit weak. The b file is open. Pawn c3 might be coming. Although I could take that and a3 is defended. But look at this. I mean, that's just unsustainable. The knight goes to f6. Okay. So if pawn e5, knight d5, can I sack the exchange? I don't think so. I don't think so. I could go bishop to e5. Monitoring the c3 square, monitoring b8, monitoring the knight. Interesting. I could go queen c2 offering a queen trade, but then I'd be hanging e4, and I don't really want to do that. I could try and play g5 in conjunction with h4. Kick the knight out, open up the h-file. That's interesting. h4, c3, g5. Taking doesn't do anything. c2 only gets a queen trade. Here, here, here. Knight e4. That might be the best that black can do, but I think we can do better than that. I think I want to keep queens on the board. We also have rook d4. That's a move. Just pinning the pawn and targeting the c4 pawn. If we take that, that's game over, basically. The king can't castle because he's completely restricted. Rook d4 looks very strong. There's no rook b8. If rook d8, we just take and play e5. That looks very good. Yeah, this looks like a really strong move. Not seeing a counter. My opponent's offered me a draw. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Let's go rook d4. I'm low on time, so I might have to shut up a little bit while I convert this position. But this is fascinating. This is one of the coolest games I think we've had on the channel in a while. Because I normally play very positional principled chess. That's generally my play style. And I think this has been a positional game, but a very exciting one. A very exciting one. So I hope you guys are enjoying, especially if you're stuck around this long. We're like, what, half an hour into this, so thank you very much. I must be putting on a good show. So yeah, I think rook d4 just diffuses black's attack. He can't castle. The king literally only has one move. Yeah, rook d8 was expected. I mean, we can take. We can also play e5. I think I'm leaning towards e5. Just securing the bishop. Hitting the knight. Knight d5 looks forced. Rook takes. I mean, I could consider queen takes. Offering the queen trade. Because then we'd be up 2 pawns. And c6 and a5 would be super weak. And this rook can't get into the game because of my bishop. Maybe a queen trade makes a lot of sense. And I don't think black can actually decline the queen trade. Knight here, queen here. The queen has no moves. Yeah, that's got to be it. That has to be the idea. And then we're up 2 pawns. Probably going to be up more. But more importantly, the black rook is completely out the game. We could also play a move like e7, just locking everything in place. Although, we have to watch for the knight controlling e7, but you get my point. This looks completely winning. To be fair, I'm not sure what else black could do in this position. I mean, it's just nothing. If you move the queen, I'll just take. Rook d4, I think, is a very nice move. That's a really weird move to play, I think. Just because generally the rooks aren't lifting themselves up like this just to attack a pawn. Especially into the center of the board. My opponent sacks his rook, trying to go for counterplay. I don't think there's any counterplay. Let's take back with the pawn, because I want to ensure that c3 can't be played. Yeah, it's a valiant effort, but it can't work. In fact, I think d7 might be most accurate. I could also go for a queen trade, though. The queen has no escape. Yeah, let's just go for a queen trade. There's no way out for the queen. We're up in exchange. We've connected past pawns. They're going to be unstoppable. d7 is also winning because e7 is going to come and you can't stop that, really. I mean, maybe you can play knight to d5, although I can just sack the rook and play e7 anyway. But queen c4, I think, is far more simple. Gets rid of any complication because, again, you have to trade queens with me. There's nothing else. The queen has no escape. I'm up 2 pawns and an exchange, and black has 0 counterplay. So, that was a pretty fun game. I have to say, that felt very, very fun. I think we dealt with the queenside attack in the perfect manner, essentially. Not panicking too much. I think a lot of people panic in those types of situations. We don't need panic. We need to be calm and just play the best moves. Let's go rook e1, getting the rook to defend. e7 was also fine, but also d7 was maybe just more winning, to be fair. Oh no, because if the rook moves in e7, you can take and the knight defends. Yeah, but that doesn't really do anything. Let's take on c6. d7's on the way. Again, I mean, d7 was probably fine in this position as well, but I'm just trying to make things easy. I don't need to be perfect. This is now defended. And after rook d8, I would have just played rook c8, and I'd just get the queen promoted. So, GG. That was a really interesting game. Let's jump into the analysis and see what the computer has to say. All right, so 90.6% accuracy for us, 78.5 for my opponent. See what the engine has to say. So, this is very standard in the opening. Here, knight a5 is a move you have to know. And there's several moves you can play against this. I prefer bishop b3, offering a trade to open up the a file for the rook. But after bishop c5, f4 is really interesting, because after d6, knight f3, very commonly you'll see knight to g4, and after knight g5, I think I have like, I think I might have a 100% win rate in this position, or something like that. There's also interesting lines after bishop g4, where we have to go knight a4, getting rid of the bishop because it's stopping us from castling. Bishop e6 is interesting, though. And I had a lot of different choices, because while I really did consider this and knight a4, getting rid of the bishop. So let's say something like bishop to b6, take, castles. While this pawn structure looks ugly, it's actually not bad. It's not easy to target, I've got to say. Like, the queen often comes to d6. Black is really good control over d4. I've got to say, I kind of struggle in these positions to find a way in. So I played f5, and the engine doesn't like f5. It also likes bishop b5, which is a move I considered. I considered this. Point being, we're now threatening to play take. So the engine wants a6, take. And if take and knight takes, queen d4 is a problem. So we don't take. Do we go f5 now? Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. Then queen e2. Say rook b8. What's the idea? g4? And if knight takes... Okay, that's pretty cool, I have to say. I went f5, though. The engine doesn't like this. But black has to find the move bishop to b4. That's the only justification, according to the engine. And if queen d3, take, and then you have to find h6. If castles, then we are better after bishop g5, even with the tripled pawns. But, you know, the triple pawns are not actually that bad, because we're stopping the pawn breaks. It's not clear how black actually targets these. I wouldn't mind this position, to be fair. So h6 would have to be the move. But my opponent goes h6 immediately. I go queen e2. Engine prefers queen d3. Really? And if knight b4? Queen e2. Bishop d4. We have to find knight d1? Or taken, knight d5, and after takes, e takes, queen e7, king e7, king has to come to d2. d1 is no good. This is a strange position. But I guess maybe c3 is on the way. But queen e2. And here the only way to punish this is knight d4, which my opponent didn't play. And if knight d4, e d4, knight d5, you have to either play c6 or castle. And then after something like... I don't know, I still think we have decent chances here. Let's say bishop d2. If you take this, I'm better. I think we have clear attack as well. So I wouldn't mind this. Knight g4 is just wrong, though. And after h3, the knight can't come in because rook f1 and the knight is trapped. So in a lot of these lines, bishop c5, knight g4 is not actually a big deal. Knight goes back to f6. Here g4. Engine doesn't like g4. Once knight d5. Why? I thought if take, we're doing alright. But I was concerned about knight h5. Trying to come into g3. And here we'd have to find rook h2. Yeah, okay, I'm not finding that. I'm not finding that. Because these tactics just don't work, because knight g3, and then everything is hanging. So pawn g4. I like this move. My opponent goes knight d4. Good move. Taking is the only option. I initially missed the fact my queen was hanging, so take. I was expecting e takes, to be honest. And then after knight d5, if take, c takes or e takes, engine prefers c takes. And this bishop kind of sucks. There is queen h4. And after queen f2, if take and d3 check and bishop e3, take, rook c1. I guess we just have more space. It's maybe, well, it's probably a draw. But, I don't know, king can probably come to d4 or something. Looks interesting. My opponent takes with the bishop. We go bishop d2. Engine prefers knight d5. Why did I not play this? Because c3 is coming. This is, yeah, this makes a lot of sense. Bishop drops back. Take, bishop e3 maybe? I mean, this isn't the best move, but fundamentally, feel like we're doing quite well. Okay, bishop d2. c6 is a mistake. I thought he might actually take the knight. I thought he might do that. The engine does like it, but even though the engine says zeros here, this looks easier to play for white. I mean, this just looks easier. Like rook he1, we're gonna break on the queen side. The the engine wants g5 here for black, which was a move I considered in a couple of situations. But even after take, this does look strange. c6 though, we castle queenside and we're better. Queen a5, king b1 is the best move because of course black is threatening take, and take. So king b1, queen b4, a3, and this knight a4. The engine prefers h4, looking for g5. Also rook he1, just defending the e-pawn, so my queen doesn't have to. But I really liked this line with c3, because I figured taking was wrong, which it is. Here, bishop f2 is suggested by the engine. And after queen f2, queen a4, queen e2, just defending the pawns. I think b5 and maybe black is equal. Maybe. But after queen a4... By the way, I was thinking if bishop to b6, I play take, and something like bishop c1. Engine likes g5 here. Maybe I would find that in this position. Oh yeah, that actually makes a lot more sense. Take. And we are doing very well. But queen a4, we just have cd4. And you can't take this, I don't think, because of e5, and the game is over. So that's correct calculation. If this is taken, queen takes, the king has to move. Engine here finds bishop h6. If pawn takes, the knight hangs. If rook takes, I guess g5 happens. Which is very cool. But realistically, we could just play queen d4. And we'd be equal material. But the king sucks. And we're going to break through anyway. So b5. Here bishop e4 is a miss. But it's still good. Here the engine wants cb5. Which looked wrong to me. If cb5, then bishop b4. Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes sense. If queen d4... No, not queen c4. Queen d4, we have... Oh, we have bishop h6 as well, opening this up. Okay, yeah, that's fine. Because I was initially thinking de5, de5, and bishop b4, stopping the king from castling. Which is actually fine, but I was slightly concerned about a5, bishop d6, and b4. I wasn't completely sure about this. Engine thinks it's fine. After ba3, we have to find bishop d6, though. Which I would say is not obvious. If this queen takes, again, I wouldn't say it's obvious. So, bishop e4, the engine says it's a miss, but the only way for black to counter this is c5. And after dc5, a5. And after bishop e1, b4. And we have many moves here anyway. We're still better, queen c2 being the best move. But yeah, we have lots of ideas. Even rook d6 is fine. And if ba3, bishop c3, I still think we've got the better end of this. But pawn a5 allows bishop d6, and we're completely winning. Although pawn a5 looks very natural. So bc4, de5 is the best move, forcing the knight back to d7, and then e6 is killer. If you don't take this, again the engine likes rook d4, but also e5 is good, ef7 is good. Rook d4 I think is the key move though. So my opponent does fe6, fe6, knight f6, and then rook d4 is the best move. And I was really happy to find this. e5 followed by rook d4 is also good, but this is the key idea. I was considering trying to play on the f-file, like rook f1, queen f2, and e5. Or even f2 followed by e5. But it felt too slow. Rook d4, to me, felt like it just solved every problem. Because now there's no attack. There's no rook b8. There's no knight d5. There's no pawn c3. There's nothing. So rook d8, pawn e5. My opponent sacks the rook, which is the best move, to be fair. If knight d5... The engine suggests queen f3, but I was just going to play queen c4 and just get a rook trade because we're up 2 pawns, c6 is going to fall, a5 is weak, the king can't castle, the rook can't get into the game, it's over. My opponent sacks the rook, but it's not good enough. After castles, e7, I mean, everything is winning, but just getting the queens off the board is the most simple option. Rook e1, knight d5, rook c6, and after knight f4, d7, and my opponent resigns because the rook moves, and then I'm rook c8. I mean, I also have this, I also have anything else, basically, but rook c8 is the cleanest way, in my opinion. Because if knight e6, rook e6, you're going to have to do this. So, yeah. That's very nice. And we are on what? 2227. That's not bad. That is not bad. That might put us in the top 10,000 players in the world, actually. So, yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. If you want to see my full Vienna guide on my YouTube channel, video is up there, although I am going to be doing a much more in-depth one on my school community, which you can get a free trial to in the description. And if you want to see the previous episodes of the Climb 2 and beyond 2200, check out the playlist down there. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in one of those videos.